It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Well, kind of live anyway. Today's episode was pre-taped, but I'd like to welcome our special guest, Mr. Craig Pilo, Taxi's head screener. You guys always like it when he's on the show, and we haven't done one of these in a while, and for a lot of the new members that don't even know that we've got a head screener. Actually, I'm going to scoot this way. If you can scoot a little bit.
You want it closer?
Not closer. Closer to me. Yeah.
Closer to you. Got it.
Yeah.
There we go.
Not on my left. Anyway, we do have a head screener at Taxi, and Craig has been with us for how many years now?
6 total, wow. But 3 is the head screener, I believe.
And so he started out as a regular screener, and the reason we asked him to become the head screener was he was one of the very best regular screeners we ever had, and earned the slot as head screener. So before I get into the mindset of regular screeners, I want to talk, what is a typical day or week like for you? What are the things that you do as head screener?
Well, typically I'll spot check a lot of the critiques that the regular screeners do and make sure that everybody's on point, screening the right listing with the right parameters. I'll QC a lot of those and just make sure that the screeners are providing valuable feedback, that they're on topic. And then, once in a while we'll get some complaints.
We get complaints?
We get complaints. We get complaints. And I'll usually field the complaints as long as they're about a screener or a critique. And I'll try to, be as objective as I can in fielding that. And, most of the time I found with the complaints, the screeners got it right. Most of the time. We've done the math on this before. I believe it's 97, 98% the screeners are right. But, we don't use AI. They're human beings. And once in a while there is a mistake that needs to be clarified. And we do our best to make amends on the slim chance that the screener did make a mistake. And
is it a mistake or I mean, sometimes they're functional mistakes, like they click the return button.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be a forward.
And we're pretty good about catching that. But I'd say, the gray area would be not that maybe the screener didn't provide valuable feedback. Or the feedback was less than perfect or less than helpful. Let's put it that way. If they said something that wasn't helpful to a member and the member called us out on it, we try to do our best to do right by everybody, And the other thing I do kind of is proof the playlist to make sure we're sending the client the very, very best playlist that we have, and make sure that once all the forwards are compiled, that they also sound like they belong on the same playlist, to try to be as valuable as I can to our clients as well, because we have a responsibility. What a lot of people don't understand is we have a responsibility to everybody. We have a responsibility to send our clients the best forwards that we can, the best of the stuff. We also have a responsibility to be fair to our members. So, and we also try to be nice to each other here in the office, and we all have to work together on the same team.
We do that?
We, believe it or not, we make an effort with that. Some days it's more obvious than others, but I believe we all make a decent effort to be nice. Some days it's easier than others.
Let's talk about when a member has a complaint that I can't believe your screener didn't forward this. It was so on target.
Yeah, we get that.
And so when you get that, and you go back as a highly experienced screener that was one of the most multi-genre screeners that we've ever had, probably, and you look at it, and the screener got it about, you wouldn't have forwarded it either.
Correct.
But maybe you feel that the screener could have given one more sentence explaining why it didn't get forwarded. So is that your job, is to say, I agree with what the screener decided, but I think the screener could have given you this additional information to let you know why they didn't forward it?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Most of the time when things get returned, it's for pitch accuracy. In other words, the song may have been great. I mean, we've returned great music, no doubt about it. But as you know, most of the time, things get returned because it wasn't pitched properly. Either you had I could write a book about that, but if it's lately we've been doing a lot of replacement style listings, right? They have a song in a movie that got temped in, they need to replace it with something else. So we'll run a temp replace style listing. Well, for those style listings, you got to remember the director, the producer, maybe the music supervisor have been listening to that song that had been temped into the movie for God knows how long, maybe a year while they were putting it together. So they want something that's a similar tempo with similar instrumentation, similar energy, similar mood. So you could submit a great song, but if you're not within 10 or 15 clicks of that on the BPM meter, and maybe the track's in a major key, you're in a minor key, maybe theirs is guitar based, yours is synth based, all those things contribute. And it's easy for the screeners to just jump on the major things, why it's wrong, and then move on to the next thing. So once in a while, if people complain, I'll try to fill in the gaps and give a little bit more in-depth explanation of why it was returned. Now, this doesn't mean email the head screener every time you get a return. Please do not do that. Because I get overloaded every time we do a Taxi TV episode. Like my inbox gets blown up.
So let's talk about when you were still a regular screener, and the mindset of all the rest of our screeners. And just so you guys know, we've had hundreds, like somewhere in the 400s of screeners over the almost 33 years we've been in business now. But in any given month, we probably have between 10 and 25 screeners that are active. I mean, sometimes it could be just we need a screener for 1 4-hour shift or something, got very few submissions, and they are particularly good at that genre, so we might not see them again for 2 months. Other screeners tend to work 3 or 4 days a week in 4-hour shifts. So it varies, but just so you know, we don't have like 400 screeners all sitting under the roof waiting for submissions. But when you were still a regular screener, and I guess on behalf of or representative of the other screeners who work for us every day, what is the mindset when they sit down? Because a lot of people, I believe, think that the screeners are looking for any reason they can to not forward something. They're looking at it from a negative perspective. What can I find that's wrong with this thing so we don't forward it? Is that typical?
Absolutely not. First, let me preface all that by saying when I started here, we were still screening in that room. We were in person. Now they're remote since COVID. But the first thing that I learned was that I was not the best screener. I was amazed by the talent pool of screeners that you have, that all of them are really talented in their area of expertise. I mean, you've got some really talented people here, people that have, conducted orchestras and people that have had Grammys and people that have, written #1 country hits. And so I was humbled the first time I came into the building because I was not the best screener.
And just so people know, even though you sucked as a screener, no, even though you thought you weren't the best screener, I mean, Craig went to University of North Texas.
Yeah, no, I have a good resume, and I have a lot of experience.
Let me don't pat yourself on the back.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Craig went to UNT, music major, is an A-rated studio drummer, has played live on the road with major acts. He's the real deal, and knows a ton about music theory. Not that you necessarily need theory, but it comes in handy sometimes. So he was highly experienced, well qualified. So for you to say that there are other screeners that humble you, you've never said that to me.
And before. I got into sync after I realized I didn't want to be a touring musician forever. So I started getting more into sync because I knew I didn't want to live on a tour bus my whole life. I mean, that was cool, but when you start getting older, it's less glamorous.
How many smelly feet do you have?
Yeah. I can road stories for the bar at the Westin next time, please.
Okay.
But I came to the building and I was humbled by the amount of talent that there were in the other screeners. And we've all got our areas. And like Michael said, I've screened in more than one area because I'm comfortable in more than one genre. But that was number one, was the talent level here is higher than most people give them credit for. Like most of the screeners know their area and their field very well. They are experts in their area, and I have people emailing me, "You're so-called experts." I'm like, well, you know what, bro? They are. So
a lot of people want to imagine, because they're butthurt when they don't get it forward, that the person listening must be like an intern, or somebody inexpensive and a rookie, and that couldn't be farther from the truth.
So that being said, they do not look for reasons to return it. I know it feels like that. Listen, the screeners have submitted music in their lifetime as well. They've been part of either a production music library or sent it to a director or the senior VP of post, and they've had their music rejected.
Or pitching to labels.
Whatever.
Well, yeah.
So they know what it feels like to get their music rejected. These are not rookies. These are not people that have never had their music returned. Nobody here is perfect. It was a learning process for them too. They submitted stuff that was off base. That's how they know the language. That's how they know what these people are looking for, because they themselves have had music submitted that's been returned. So
let's clarify that. Not submitted to taxi.
Right. Yeah, they're not allowed to.
Yeah, screeners and staff are not allowed to submit to any taxi listings, because we don't want anybody to ever say, "Oh, you guys are forwarding your own people,"
Correct.
or that you've
got that doesn't
bias.
happen.
So yeah, nobody on the staff. As a matter of fact, Andrew, who writes the listings, been a member for many years, is not allowed to even have any contact or know I guess he knows who the companies are, but he doesn't have any contact with them or any influence whatsoever over what the screeners forward or don't.
That's correct, yeah. So, and to be honest with you, as a screener, I think it's easier to forward something than it is to return it. I mean, when you forward something, you just click forward
and high five them, and you're out.
Done. Next thing, you keep your. And when it's not perfect, you have to explain why, and you have to be good at it. So it takes a little bit more effort to return something. So they don't just look for anything to find wrong with it. They try to imagine if what you submitted fits on a playlist with the references. And then they take any other pertinent information that comes from the listing and try to incorporate that while you're listening. So again, they're going to be listening for instrumentation, tempo, mood, and then they'll read the brief. Is there a duration limit? Is there they want a female singer for this? They want a male singer. It's instrumental. So all that kind of stuff is taken into consideration. So no, they don't come targeting for you or gunning for you or looking to blow you down. That's just, that's not how that works.
I'm sorry. I've got to adjust my green screen a little bit. My sweatshirt, the logo on my sweatshirt is freaking out. Anyway, I don't want to deal with that right now. So how do you know that they're being kind of consistent and fair across the board? Or, you know what, I've told people before, they don't believe me. I don't believe that everybody believes that we have an in-house rule that if a screener wakes up with a migraine or had a serious argument with their spouse this morning or their dog passed away last night or something, they can bow out of screening that shift that day because we don't want that baggage coming into work with them. So we have trained the screeners, for lack of a better word, to know if I pass on this work today, I'm not going to miss out on the work. They'll hold it for me for tomorrow or the next day, assuming that the timeline, the delivery date to the client works out well for that, which it almost always does. But people don't believe me. How do you know that they're giving their best work every day and being fair and consistent?
How do we know that they're being objective, right?
Yeah.
How do we know they're not just forwarding music they like and returning music they don't like, or because their mood, maybe they're hungover,
right?
And they,
mood and taste. We can talk about both of those issues because a lot of people think, the screener doesn't get me.
I would think that's a two-layer answer.
Yeah.
For one, all the screeners that keep the job have a certain amount of consistency. They constantly forward the music that the clients want. And I'm also the second layer to that, and there's 2 layers past me. But I would, first of all, if they forwarded something that wasn't good, that didn't fit the listing, not that wasn't good. I don't like using the good versus bad thing.
Right.
I like to use, did it fit the listing or not? Was this what they asked for? If it did not fit the listing, it would come to me and I'd go rethink it. I'd give them the benefit of the doubt, but then I'd have to kind of screen it again. Maybe it didn't fit. Okay. Maybe they had a bad day. That's one time out of 1,000. Now, if the screeners are developing an inconsistency, usually I would reach out to them at that point and go, hey, listen, you forwarded a bunch of things to this that weren't good. Or I got a bunch of complaints for things that should have been forwarded. So what's going on here? So that would be the first line of defense. I'd reach out to the screener and go, what's going on? But it wouldn't happen for very long. I mean, those things they're identified
early,
quickly and addressed most of the time before anybody else but me even knows about it. On the rare occasion, I might put a playlist together. It'll go to Tom. Tom will take a look at it, and then it goes to the client. And God forbid it gets to the client and it's not what they want. That would come back to all of us.
Right.
So how often do you get complaints about all of us?
Every day.
No, you do not. No, you do not. We're pretty consistent.
No,
right? The clients are pretty happy.
I get incredibly good compliments about
Yeah.
you guys. As a matter of fact, you weren't in the other day, but we had that meeting with the A&R department,
Right.
with a couple of our clients and a few of our members, just to talk about kind of an end of the year assessment of how we're doing. And somebody, I can't remember if I think it was the clients, actually said, there's nothing we would recommend that you guys need to improve.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, we love what you do. And I hear that at the road rally, before we go on stage, and I've got clients in the little holding pen before we get up on the dais, and they'll say to me, it's good to see you, man. I always mean to tell you what a great job you guys do. So we, at the risk of sounding less than humble, we get a lot of compliments from the industry. And frankly, I don't think a lot of these companies would be as big or successful as they are. Well, one of them said in the meeting the other day, you guys are our primary, you're our only resource. I don't even know where else we would go to get this much great music on a regular basis. So
yeah, I heard from a couple clients as well at the road rally. They were very complimentary. But like I said, I think what fuels, and again, I apologize if anybody's got an email from me where I've said this, but I say it a lot. The clients count on us to forward the best of the best music. And because we do that,
and most on target,
and we have that high bar, that keeps them coming back for more. And it provides more opportunity to you guys. So again, if something was less than perfect, or we delivered some music that was off target, there's many layers. It would have to go wrong many times before it got off my desk.
Right.
So,
and it almost seems, I wish we got more feedback from the clients when we send them the music, but we're so on target that there's really what I learned in that meeting a couple days ago was they don't really have a reason to reach out. And honestly, I wish they would reach out and give us a good job or 90% job, but they don't, because it's consistently really good in what they need.
Yeah, sometimes no news is good news. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like if they're happy, let's just roll with what we got.
I like the feedback. What can I say?
Yeah.
I just want us to get high-fived by them all the time.
The acknowledgement.
Or not, if there's something we need to improve, we want to know about it. Apparently we're doing a good job, so yay us. Some new members, especially new members, I should say, think that the listings are a bit overwhelming when they look at them at first glance. It's like they're this long, and it's got to be this, but not that, and make sure you do this, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, dude, I've got 32 songs that I've written over the last 10 years that I've got recorded, and I've got them sitting on a drive, or maybe even, on DATs in a drawer or something, or on CD, whatever. And they don't want to write to the brief. They don't want to write to the listing. They want to submit material they've already got. I think that is, generally speaking, not without exceptions, but almost always a bad approach. Can you tell the viewers why it's a bad approach to take existing music and pitch that versus writing to the brief? And then we'll talk about how hard it is to learn how to write to the brief.
Yeah, first of all, I understand where they're coming from, because they've poured their heart and soul into whatever genre they have in front of them, and they feel it's good, and they want to share that, and they want other people to think it's good, and they think that they're just going to submit that, and they're going to accept it and take it because it's good. And that's just not right. That's just not how this works, especially with a lot of the temp replace stuff that we've seen lately, or some of those submissions might work depending on the era, like when we get era-specific requests. Like if we want 80s or 90s and you have that, then that's your opportunity to submit that.
They're looking for the sound of the era.
Exactly.
But let's take that out of the mix for a minute.
Okay, good. I'm just trying to...
talk about somebody who wrote stuff, 2 years ago.
Exactly.
And I'm just pretty of the era.
Exactly. I'm just trying to find opportunities for them to contribute and take part in Taxi. But that being said, for a specific brief, that kind of stuff doesn't matter, because they have in their head, the client or the music supervisor, senior VP of post, showrunner, whoever we're talking about is making the request, already has a sound and an idea and maybe even a temp track in mind. If that's what they want.
Right.
So no matter how good your music is, if it doesn't fit what they have in their mind, and the best way to figure out what they have in their mind is to read that long, detailed brief, which I've kind of grown to love because it's very detailed. It has as much information as you need to get your music in front of these clients. So they have this sound in their head, and that's your job to capture that. And the best way to capture that sound is to read the brief and tailor your music towards what they want, not what you want to give them. There's a difference.
Okay, so that gets back to the first half of my original question, which was for newer members, they think it's just daunting as can be. You want me to write something to this brief? Dude, I'm a creator. I emote. I create, it comes out of my musical soul, my brain, my heart, and I totally get that. But the film and TV music industry is really the film and TV industry, as somebody.
That's right.
I think Mason Cooper said it on a panel at the rally, and others have said it before him. That you're not in the music industry so much as you are in the movie industry or the TV industry, and music has a role to play, just like an actor or a set designer or an editor or a color corrector. All those little pieces of the puzzle go into making the final product, and music is one of them. So that's why you do have to create music that fits the brief. Have you, in your pretty lengthy career, ever heard of a situation where anybody, a showrunner, executive producer, editor, director on a movie, anybody ever said, I don't care that this isn't the kind of music we're looking for. It's so frickin' good.
No.
We've got to put this in the movie. Therefore, let's rewrite the scene.
No.
Let's call all the production people, the lighting, the grips, everybody, the caterers.
No, it never
get them all
happened.
back to the location
Yeah.
and reshoot the scene because I love this song.
No.
But people think that.
Yeah.
Musicians, and I get it because it's what they do. It's their art. It's their creation. So in their mind, it's really hard for them to be objective and separate him or herself from it and put themselves in the other person's shoes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they don't do.
Yeah. And it's hard.
And I will say this. There is, and again, I'm going to upset some purists now, some of my diehard jazz friends and some of my super creative friends. There is a creative element in production music. If you let there be, you can make a cool cue. You can make a cool 2.5-minute song that fits the needs of what somebody else wants. Now, it's going to take some effort, but again, I think educating yourself and arming yourself with those tools is the best way to do it. If you don't know anything about songwriting, chord structure, lyric writing, or writing to prompt, then it's going to be a difficult assignment for you, no doubt about it. It's not for everybody, but there is a creative element if you've got the tools or the experience or the track record of providing this kind of music. I enjoy it. It's part of the reason I'm here.
That's part of the creative process. It's
as creative as you make it.
Yeah.
You can write to prompt and still come up with something cool without sacrificing your creative IQ. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Without sacrificing your creative dignity.
Yeah.
There's a word there somewhere.
That's an unusual combination, but it works.
Yeah.
I had an example the other day of dramedy cues, which are extremely common. Every library's got 20, 50, 100 of them, and they're all remarkably similar in that they generally use pizzicato strings. It's that sneaking around the bushes, looking at the neighbor's window.
Yeah, the cat gets into the garbage. Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
That kind of stuff. And I can't remember, maybe I was talking to Jim Thacker the other day during Taxi TV on Monday, but you can even make that creative because you can look at it as a creative challenge. Okay, almost every library's got a lot of pitsy dramedy stuff already. What can I do that still sounds like dramedy, still has a pizzicato vibe to it, but maybe doesn't use violins and violas and cellos as the pizzicato instrument? You could take a banjo and mute it with your palm a little bit to deaden the strings and do little plucks on a banjo.
I like going percussive with marimba. And
yeah.
Stuff. There's lots of...
So the creativity becomes that personal challenge of how can I do what feels familiar to them but is different by 15 or 20% so that they go, oh, I like that because it's what I need, but it's a little different in the sonic texture maybe.
Yeah.
So back when you were still writing stuff, and I know you still do, and doesn't submit to taxi listings, got his own client list from before we ever knew him. how do you stay on task when you're in the process of incorporating your creativity, yet trying to fit the brief? How do you stay in that lane without going in a rabbit hole or drifting too far left or right or center?
That's an excellent question, because it does happen, and sometimes the direction you're going in works, so just let it go, and that becomes its own thing, and then you come back and start over on a new piece. The first thing I learned with that is just move on from something. If it's not working for this listing, maybe it's not this prompt that I'm writing for. Maybe it's something else, but that's okay.
So do you finish that one because it's going well, or do you say, I'm going to put that on the shelf and get back to the task?
Either or both. Like if I'm all the way there and I have a vision of how this might work for something else, and I've taken it so far left, I might go ahead and finish it. Or I might say, you know what, this is 90% there. I'll wait until I get a brief in that genre, and then I'll tailor it to that thing. But in the meantime, I'm going to walk away from that because that doesn't work with this. I'm going to start over. And I think that, allows you to be a lot more productive. And you got to not be afraid to call a spade a spade. If you're working on something that has gone so far away from what you're working on, you got to start over, because you're going to end up not giving the client what they asked for.
Do you have a time limit, or is it an internal clock? How do you know when to throw a flag on the play?
Depending on how much time I've got left to submit for a brief. Like I know for some, with all these things, they're extremely time sensitive. So unfortunately, we'd all like an infinite amount of time to finish a product that we don't have. You've got a finite amount of time, and if you've devoted way more time than you were supposed to, it's different for everything. If you've got like an end of week deadline and it's already Wednesday and you don't have more than 4 things recorded, it's time to move on. You got to give yourself a day or two to step back, listen to it, mix it, master it, give it to the client. Maybe they want an MP3 first to approve it. You've got to give yourself some time. But yeah, pretty quickly, I would say early on, because it's pretty time sensitive. And when they're asking for pizzicato, and all of a sudden you've developed some neoclassical ballet thing that's legato. That's not it, And it might be cool, but that's for something else,
But when they hear it, they're going to love it. It doesn't matter
it
doesn't fit the brief.
They're going to say, Craig, that's not what we asked for, and
Exactly.
Stop submitting,
So for the newer members who are watching this, going back to the theme of the listings can be intimidating. One of the problems that people have is understanding the role and the job that the references are supposed to do. New members almost always default to, I need to write something that sounds like that, which I personally have always said, no, you need to triangulate. That's a word that I first used because we generally have 3 references. Oftentimes, the first reference will come from the client, and then we'll find 2 others that fit with it. But we don't going back to triangulation, I'm trying to find the right way to say this. Going back to triangulation, my feeling is that you listen to the references and look for what they have in common. You don't try and match or copy or emulate anyone. That would be bad anyway. But are they all about 120 BPM? Are they all keyboard driven? Are they all major keys? Do they have a lot of percussion in them? Are they guitar based? Look for the commonalities. As a creator yourself, is that an approach that you would take when you would sit down with a brief and look at the refs, which are never as plentiful as our refs?
Yeah, our briefs are better than you're going to get from a library, a supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, we did that at the rally on one of the panels. We talked about interpreting taxis, listings, and industry briefs in general. And some of the briefs, very common that the briefs will just say, looking for happy up-tempo tunes. It's like, well,
how helpful is that?
Yeah, are you talking about keyboard-driven stuff, guitar-driven stuff? Are you talking pop, rock, EDM? What are you talking? Whereas Taxi gets much more specific. So when you started writing the briefs, what was your approach? How did you
assuming it's not
a
a replacement style request, which again is in its own category, and a lot of people have a hard time delineating that. But assuming it's just a regular a regular brief. Again, as a percussionist, I identify the tempo first. I try to get within 10 clicks, and assuming that if they want an up tempo thing, let's say it's between 120 and 135, try to come in with something at 125, 127 in there that's comfortable for you. Next, identify, your genre. Is it EDM? Is it pop? Is it a 4-chord progression, or is it if you're working on Americana, is it mandolin-based 1-4-5 progression? Is it a pulsing investigative tension cue, which largely stays on the same note or the chord the whole time? Exactly. So, the first thing you're going to want to do is identify your genre. And they're usually pretty close. If it's Americana, you're going to have your 1-4-5-1s. If it's a tension thing, it's largely going to stay on one chord. Maybe you'll modulate for a B section. If it's a pop tune, maybe you'll see like a 4-chord major progression kind of thing. So, identify the tempo first, maybe your chord structure second. And again, it doesn't have to be that order. Like if you're a piano player, you're typically your ear's going to go to the chord structure first. Again, as a percussionist, I tend to focus on the groove and the tempo first. Those are important to me. So once you've established your tempo, your chord structure, I would move on to the instrumentation. Do all three of the references have the same or similar instrumentation? If it's Americana, is it mandolin, banjo, acoustic guitar, upright bass, maybe some light percussion?
Well, what if the three references all have slightly different? Let's assume Americana, they all have an acoustic guitar, maybe even a Gibson 335, not distorted, kind of electric guitar in there. One of them leans more towards banjo, another one leans more toward mandolin and guitar, and another one uses a dulcimer or something.
Okay, so that would tell me that's a dobro or something. Yeah, so that would tell me that it's a little bit wider net, and anything that's in that might work. But again, I would look for other things that are common. How close are the tempos? Is it a 2-beat feel? Duka chaka, duka chaka, duka chaka, or is it a straight feel? Those things are gonna help. So from there, once I've established all that stuff, and again, I'll write it down. And again, I'll do this when people are arguing why it got returned, because I'll go back to the references and write all those characteristics down. And then after I create my cue, I will play it in the list with the references. Now, does it sound like those three things go on the same playlist or the same album? We're showing our age.
Would they be playing in the background at the same party? Whatever,
right.
Yeah.
So if the answer is no, okay, this one sticks out because the dobro is too loud in my mix and none of those have a dobro. It's mandolin. Okay, maybe I take that out altogether, or maybe I just duck it in the mix or use less of it. But I'm trying to blend what I created with what's on the references. Is mine a good fourth track for the first three references? Does mine flow seamlessly after those first three? Is mine the fourth track on that playlist? Could mine be the fourth reference? And if it's too much of a stretch, or mine's way better than those first three, I don't want it way better than mine. I want it to sound like it belongs with those first three tracks. Is mine a decent fourth reference? If the answer is yes, then I think that's a solid submission. If for any reason, and you know what, maybe I got the tempo wrong. Maybe mine is faster than those by 2 clicks and it just sticks out. It rubs you wrong. It doesn't, or mine's too slow. Maybe they weren't asking for a ballad. They wanted mid to up tempo. So it could be that. These are in a minor key. Oh, wow. Maybe I should, do one,
Right.
I mean, so, and you might not know that until you play it on the list with the playlist. And if it stands out, maybe go back and tweak it. And I would do that. The other thing you can do too is if you're actually writing to picture, go on YouTube, find a scene of somebody getting murdered.
Right.
And mute
a lot of that on screens this week.
That's right. Don't get me started on that, because that's another thing. But find a scene and turn the audio off, and then play your track. Does it work with what's on the picture?
And look at it objectively when you're doing it. Bring somebody else in. Hopefully somebody who can be a little critical of you, not like your spouse. Sorry.
There's a lot of tools out there to help you get where you need to be, and I think I don't want to say people are lazy, but they're always looking for this silver bullet or this fast track to getting placements, and it's not there. You have to put the work in and realize maybe what you created isn't as perfect as you think, and you can find that out by A/Bing it with the references, by finding a scene on YouTube or your TV. Just mute the TV and find a way to play your music.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that it takes work, because so many people have this mindset. I've been talking a lot about this lately at the rally and on Taxi TV. We were all trained for about 3 decades to think all you got to do is write a hit. I saw somebody actually say that in the comment section under the Taxi TV from a week ago. I get it. All I need to do is write a hit. No, in the context of film and TV, almost never are they looking for a hit, because that would distract from the dialogue and the story that's going on the screen. But people think that magic bullet theory that applied back in the record industry, when all you needed were 3 great songs, a good-looking singer, and a good stage show, at the Whiskey, and you could get a record deal. And they're stuck there, and they don't understand that, again, they are in the TV and film business providing a piece of the puzzle,
right?
Not looking for hits. So
you need to eat something.
I did. I did right before we went live. I had 4 Trader Joe's meatballs. Oof. But then I used a breath mint because I knew I'd be sitting close to you. So are there any other common mistakes that you can think of that you encounter as you roll it as head screener that you shake your head and go, oh, you were pretty close, but I wish you would get past this, making this mistake? Are there, other than not nailing the brief, not really submitting, which is, I would venture say, 80% of returns under the roof
for pitch accuracy,
pitch accuracy, which just means, did you give them what they asked for? And again, it goes back to that belief of, it's so friggin' good, they're going to hear it and go, doesn't matter, that's not what.
That's most of it.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think frustrates the screeners and me and some people in the office is not so much the lack of experience, but you have to listen and watch TV to listen how the music is used in TV and in films. And I know you and I have talked about going to see, the big movies and how it's mixed in Atmos but you have to hone in on how music is used in the movies, and you have to be familiar with that process. And sometimes I can hear the lack of experience in the emails and in the way the music is created, that you've never fully dove into how music is used in TV and film as a support system or as underscore, or maybe it is a feature, but it's just how it's used in general. There's a general lack of understanding, and there's just more to it than getting a laptop with Logic on it and getting a membership to Splice. There's just more involved. There's a compositional element that's missing from certain genres, and then there's overcomposing that we get from other genres. And I'll create 2 theories with the intent of not offending everybody out there, but maybe offending everybody a little bit equally. If you're a great hip-hop composer or producer, you're probably very strong at putting beats together and assembling samples and maybe even the MC. That's great. But sometimes you're shy of the compositional element. Like maybe the song just stops at the end. Well, you need an ending.
Right.
And I'm not going to say certain genres are more guilty of it than others, but they are. And
you just said it.
Yeah. So there's a compositional element that gets ignored, and that's bad, and that shows a lack of experience. Vice versa. You get the orchestral guys that could write a symphony, and they're way above all of us as far as their compositional skills and how things resolve, and their recapitulation goes into their coda with the with the cadence at the end, and it's very fancy how they do all this stuff. Then they try to write a hip hop cue, and it's got all that stuff in there,
right? And
that's overcomposed. That's too much. There's too much going on. You tried to cover too much territory, so you have to dive and be a little bit more genre specific. You have to know your parameters. And again, write to the listing. Understand how music is used, and you have to understand satisfying the needs of what the picture needs. And when you're writing for sync, there's this element of moving picture that you're being hired or contracted or commissioned to satisfy.
Somebody right now watching this is thinking, but I'm not writing to picture. I'm writing for a library. And any library owner will tell you they want to sign music that can be licensed, would fit in and be licensed for numerous things, not just one thing, because that way they'll sign it,
right.
It'll get used in one thing and sit there in their catalog forever, not making them money. So they're looking for music that has multiple uses. It has kind of a universal or general applicability factor.
And that's the difference between score and production music to begin with.
Right. So, yeah, you have to, this goes back to your point earlier, which was watch TV. My family would tell you I watch way too much TV, but I do it with my trusty cell phone sitting on my lap, and I'm constantly Shazamming stuff. I'm constantly.
Yeah.
Because I want, oh, that's cool, and it works really well in that scene. Who is it? And then when the show's over, I'll go listen to their other stuff and go, is it the band's general vibe that got them that placement? Or was it the lyric in this particular song that got them that placement? Was it an era thing? Was it, this band was really hot in 1988, and the show seems to take place in the late 80s. So the more you think about those things, it's not like you have to memorize them for a history test. They become part of your musical your internal music vocabulary that becomes part of your craft as you're building stuff later. And that goes back to the creativity we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. And some of my favorite music to listen to is like while the closing credits are rolling in movies and stuff. And then they'll pull like, their second favorite song or their big heavy license to play at that. And I sit there and watch the credits because I'm always looking for people I know. I know him, I know that musician, I know that supervisor, I know this person, and so it's fun for me. And a lot of times the music that's playing during the closing credits is some of the most memorable, whether it's a TV series or a movie. It's fun.
It's funny. There's a movie theater out by my house called Sinopolis. It was probably the first like luxury cinema, like $22. You get a big overstuffed first class seat that totally reclines.
They bring you drinks while you're there. I've been there
dinner.
A bunch. Yeah,
their
it's
food,
nice. Yeah.
Food is way overpriced, but it's pretty darn good. And I always chuckle because I always stay for the credits, much to my wife's chagrin, although she's usually texting the kids right after the movie while I'm watching the credits. But if you look around the room, there'll always be another person or two.
And they're in the industry too, probably.
All of them. Yep. It's because of
somebody that worked on the movie, maybe.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
One of my favorite stories about that. Well, there's two. A shameless self plug. One, I played on the closing credits for that god-awful movie. It was called Basic with Samuel Jackson and John Travolta. It was called Basic. Yeah,
missed it.
It was worth missing, trust me. But they did a remake of Black Betty by the Ram Jam, and I played drums on that. So naturally, I stayed for the credits to hear how I sound on the big screen. Right. But the other one was there's a movie called One Night in Miami, and I hadn't seen Hamilton at this point, but during the closing credits, Leslie, I believe his name is Leslie Odom Jr., sings a song called Speak Now. And I remember just thinking, I was watching the credits because I liked the movie a lot. Leslie plays Sam Cooke in the movie. And I was watching the credits, but then I just became bowled over by that song that he sings. It's called Speak Now. But that was one of the ones where I just left the theater just thinking, wow, that was a masterclass at how to use a song in a movie. It summed up the movie. It summed up the lyrics tied into the message. The song was emotional and heartfelt. It's called Speak Now.
And see, there you're getting into the craft of music supervision.
Exactly.
Because people think that music supervisors are like A&R people. They love me or they hate me, and if they love me, they're going to help me make money. It's not about them loving you, although that's part of the formula, but they could potentially even dislike the song, but know that it works so well in tying those things together that it summarizes the whole plot of the movie, that sonically and texturally it is representative of the two main characters. They were in a tender love affair, and the song's got a tender vibe. All those little things that we don't think about as moviegoers come into play. So just absorb it. Look, you want to be in this business. Experience the business. Understand the business, because it's not just about you, your music, and somebody
it's pretty
falling
far
in
from
love
that.
with it.
And I don't even know who the music supervisor was on that. I will look them up at some point and send them an email and go, look, what you did here was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen Hamilton at the time. Leslie Odom was in the original Hamilton. He played Aaron Burr. So he's got theater stage, and he can definitely sing and write and produce, and he's the full package. I didn't know who he was at the time when I heard that piece of music. So
I still haven't seen Hamilton, so I still don't know.
Highly recommended.
A few minutes ago, you were talking about overcomposed. I want to go back to two things you said. First of all, third thing, is it a good fourth track? I'm going to start incorporating that into the listings.
Is it a good fourth track? Yeah,
with the refs. That's a great line. I've never heard you say that. Overcomposed. People more often than not, left to their own devices, will overcompose because there's a natural tendency to want to show off what you got. And I totally get that. I completely and utterly get that. You've worked hard to become this good and you want to show people, but they're not looking for how good you are at writing. They will like you better if it's simple.
And you know who's the biggest offender there? I picked on the hip hop guys. Now I'm going after my own people.
Jazz?
Well, the jazzers for one, but your music school people that graduated with a degree in music. I just graduated from blah 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 university, and I got my master's, and I'm going to show you how many chords and how many things and
I can diminish anything.
Oh man, I'm going to show you how to do this, and they do, and you hear it and you just go, wow, it's good, but there's way too many ideas crammed into too little a space. This doesn't breathe at all. It's overcomposed. It's too busy. It's too complex. I'm thinking about the music. I'm not watching the thing. It doesn't work.
Right.
And I hate going after my own people, but man, we have to again write to the prompt.
We have one client, a library that literally will only run listings looking for sparse music, and I've heard this hundreds, maybe thousands of times in my career from taxi members that the one piece of music they've got that is the most consistently income generating track that they've got is always the dumbest, simplest little thing that they did is a throwaway in 45 minutes. They laughed at themselves for doing it. They were like almost a little embarrassed by it. They sent it in. The library ended up loving it, signing it, and that's the one that generates $6,000.
I see that. I see that all the time. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So how do you know as a composer, we're getting a little bit away from your job here, but as a composer, how do you know when you're about to cross that line going from there's just enough stuff in this bag to I just put 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag?
It's hard because it's yours. You're too attached to it. I mean, a lot of times I'll have to play it for somebody else and go, hey, did I put too much stuff in here? And
who else do you play it for? I mean, does your wife count or your daughter
No,
count?
I mean, my wife
musicians?
Other musicians. My wife works in translation and stuff like that for TV and film, so it's a different mindset. But I have several writing partners, again, all of which are way more talented than I am. So I'll send it to them and go, hey, drummer wrote this, and they're like, wow, a drummer wrote this. It's too busy. It's too complex. They're like, I can't believe I'm telling a drummer to dumb it down, but they do,
This brings up a great point. I'm so glad you're talking about drummers and percussion. We get listings, which are extremely popular with our members, where clients, usually libraries, are looking for instrumental percussion tracks only. There was one it was in a little village in Italy, somebody walking downstairs. I think it was for an automotive brand years ago. That was one of the best uses I've ever seen. Sometimes soda commercials will have this where it's nothing but a percussion track. And we will get, I think the most submissions we ever got for listing was probably for one of those, and we got about 800 submissions for it. And 40% were forwarded. That's a whole other story. We had we had to call the client up and say, we've got 320 tracks to send you.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, but overwhelming on the receiving end. So we worked out a thing where we'd send them like 75 a week or something.
Oh, that's great.
And they were cool with that.
That means the taxi members did a good job there.
They did a
finally
great job.
Paying attention to what you've been talking about all these years.
But the ones that didn't get forwarded, almost every one of them, they were all great, but they were overly complex to the point where your brain would have been drawn to the, oh, that's cool. If you find yourself in many forms of music for film and TV, if an objective listener, somebody that hadn't heard it before, somebody that didn't write it, listens to it, goes, oh, I love that little flourish you did there. Bad, very bad, because you don't want the person sitting in the movie theater watching the TV show to notice a flourish or an unusual chord change or a polyrhythmic thing that's like, wow, that dude went to UNT?
University of North Texas.
It was a percussion major, because that's not what's supposed to happen. It's just supposed to be almost visceral, especially with that stuff. So I would say this is a golden rule. Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS rule.
And it's tough, too, because, with the percussion thing, and again, this is another thing that gets thrown in my lap for the complaints on this when you get returned, but you want to keep it simple, but it's also got to have forward motion. It can't be overly repetitive. What you can't do is go on Splice and grab a 1-bar thing and loop it for 2 minutes and send it to us. That's not what we mean when we say keep it simple. And there is a repetition thing that happens. Repetition is okay, but you don't abuse it. It's still got to have major compositional elements like some sort of developmental arc, some sense of forward motion. You need a beginning, you need an ending, and you need the middle part. So if you can get those things without being overly repetitive. And by being overly repetitive, I largely mean copy and paste. Do not take a 1-bar drum loop or sample and copy it for 2 minutes and send it to us. That'll get returned. It's still got to have a compositional element. And I know that some people think because it's drums, you don't need to have that. That's just not true.
Right.
So there is a fine line between being simple and being too complex. But you still can have build and forward motion and add some different sounds without it being overly busy or intrusive.
You mentioned developmental arc, which I want to pat myself on the back and take a little credit because I'm so modest.
You coined the term.
Well, the term was used in TV and film for script writing, or you watch a movie. There's a developmental arc. It's got an intro that establishes the basic premise of the story and the characters' identities, and then it goes into the shows you more of the story, and then it resolves. So that's a developmental arc. But I found out years ago in an episode of Taxi TV, shortly thereafter, we got an email from somebody who was watching that said they perceived the arc to be this, like the Arc de Triomphe or the Arch of St. Louis.
Okay.
What it really means is that it feels like it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's going somewhere. It's not static.
Right.
It develops.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's usually adding and subtracting layers of instrumentation that does that.
Yeah. And you can shift the dynamics too. I'm not saying automate the whole thing so it goes, but what I tell people to do is I point them towards the forwards blog usually. And I'll usually, when we get, obviously that one that you were talking about, there was a lot of good submissions. So go check out, pull up a previous listing for the similar thing and listen to what got forwarded to that. And see if you can identify it. And it's not the key to the city. It doesn't mean you're going to get a forward because you listen to the forwards blog. But it'll give you an idea of what the screeners thought were good forwards for that listing. And that's a resource that a lot of people don't use either, is the forwards blog. Go on there. That'll just tell you what got forwarded.
I think it's at blog.taxi.com/forward or forwards blog. That's updated every day with the music that got forwarded. As long as the member is designated, it can be publicly heard. It'll show up there, and some people, a small percentage, I would say 10% of the people that are first-time users of the forward blog, their reaction is, my stuff is better than that. I can't believe that got forwarded.
Yeah, you got to listen objectively.
Yeah, then they eat a little humble pie. And
we all did, yeah.
After the third or fourth time going back there, many, if not all, of our most successful members all credit the forward blog with learning where the bar was and where they didn't meet the bar or nail the genre or the pitch.
And that's another free tool that you can use. It doesn't cost anything to surf over there and see what got forwarded. And again, it's arming yourself with knowledge. Just take a minute and listen to that developmental arc, or how this percussion cue started with maybe a rim, and then it brought the snare in, and then maybe the toms came in later, and then towards the end it got built with some taiko drums or some bass drums or maybe some timpani or something that gave it a lower sound, and then maybe it ended with a big cymbal crash and a crescendo or a roll.
So you kept it interesting and built interest along the way without making it so interesting that it pulled the viewer out of the story.
And you can build on a you can almost keep a similar rhythm through the whole thing. I like it when it's a little varied. But you can start with a similar, keep your, it would be the same as building a cue around a central motif. It would stay centered around maybe a single pattern. I like the longer pattern. In the drumming thing, I would rather hear a 4-bar pattern or an 8-bar phrase rather than, I don't like the 1-bar loops or the 1-bar rhythmic patterns because they tend to sound too repetitive after 2 minutes. So try to play a pattern that's at least 4 bars long. But again, it depends on the references. I don't want to say too many specific things because then you'd be like, well, you said in the Taxi TV and now
I'm holding you to it.
No, it got returned.
Let's talk about something I don't have on my list of topics, which is things that sound dated. If you're standing on the stage at the road rally, you look out at the ballroom, which holds about 1,000 people. the demographic or the age curve, the members range from like 25 to 75, but I would say that there's a bump in the 45 to 60-year-old members. And we all tend to like music that we grew up with. We all fall in love with music when we're in our teens and college. And that's the stuff that stays with us for a lifetime. And as, once you get into your 50s and 60s, you don't listen to music much because you're busy being a grown-up, paying a mortgage and holding down a job and blah, blah, blah. So you're not a recreational pot smoker sitting in your dorm room listening to Steely Dan records over and over. Music takes on a different role in your life. All that said, you're stuck in an era. And that stuff comes through. So you could see a taxi listing that says modern singer-songwriter, and you submit music that sounds like James Taylor, Jackson Browne, stuff that's excellent, some of my favorites, but it sounds dated. And for the members who are older and might be guilty of being stuck in that era, there's a lack of willingness on some of their parts, but for people who are willing, they want ideas, they want tips. How do I break out of sounding dated? And let's talk about this in the context of instrumental tracks, not songs right now.
Okay.
So what would you recommend that they do as a well-qualified musician, composer, and Taxi's head screener? How does a 55-year-old person make tracks that sound more modern, less dated?
Yeah, the way you set it up, I don't have a whole lot to add to it because I feel like you already summed it up pretty well.
No, I summed up the problem. You
did.
need to give the answer.
Yeah, again, the first thing I would do is you should be able to hear the difference between a James Taylor track and an Ed Sheeran track, right?
Great example.
So you should be able to hear the difference, and there's a lot of differences. Now, we could argue all day long which one is the better music, which one you like better, which one took more ability to write, but there are differences between the two tracks. And if somebody gives you an Ed Sheeran reference, start with the basic what's in the track, which is probably the guitar and maybe the chord structure that the guitar is playing. So start with that. Aside from the tempo.
So chord structures are different from
They're different.
Decade to decade?
The song structure is different. There's not necessarily intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, interlude, or re-intro, second verse. It might just be, he might start on the chorus.
Right.
He might start right on the verse. He just starts singing right into it. Same with John Mayer, right? Like sometimes there's not an intro.
And I think that's somewhat because the attention spans are shorter and the delivery methods being TikTok and what have you.
So start with the song structure. There's some fat that can be trimmed from the 70s style folk pop versus today's. So start with that. So now you've got your song structure. And I'm not saying steal the chords like rip off another Marvin Gaye tune that's been done too many times. Start with the chord structure of one of those songs and analyze it. Find a riff that you like that sounds like it, again, could be the next song on the Ed Sheeran thing. Then, and here's where the old people get buried sometimes, the production techniques are different now. We don't have that warm analog sound. And I love that, for the record. I wish that never went away. I would still wish that there were sessions done straight to tape and that's your recording. You don't go back and edit it and fix it in post. Right. Hire guys that can play and let them be... Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But so after you analyze the song structure, study how the instruments are on the track. The guitar sounds different. Like Ed Sheeran's guitar sounds a lot different than Carly Simon, than Paul Simon, than James Taylor, than Jim Croce. It's just a different thing.
I would venture to say in Ed Sheeran's case, in general, his songs are a little more percussive.
Yeah,
and both
simple.
in his guitar playing. They're simple, they're percussive in his approach to guitar, and lyrically percussive, too.
Yeah.
James Taylor might be more floaty, legato-y, melodious, whereas Ed Sheeran is...
James Taylor's songs are story-based. They're lyric-based. Now, he's got great hooks, and, I've been to see James Taylor many times. I've known people in his band. One of my favorites, one of the all-time greats. But it's different. And Ed Sheeran's music is more simple. I'm not saying the stories aren't as deep, but it's more riff-driven. It's simple. Listen, the guitars are brighter. They're not as warm and analog, dark sounding as they were. So combine that, and then like you said, they're also a little bit more percussive.
Yeah.
So you have to dig those elements out, but that's also the job. That's also what they're looking for. So when they say they want a modern sound, if they had 50 tracks that were useful, they'd be looking for something else. So your job is to give them that modern sound, and you have to do the homework. You have to put the work in. Maybe invest in upgrading your DAW. Realize that recording your music through your, I'm sure some people have pretty elaborate home setups at this point, but you might have to upgrade the DAW. You might have to spend some time on YouTube learning some more modern production techniques, how to compress it.
It's the greatest resource on the planet.
Yeah, and it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn how to use. Let's face it, 25 years ago, if you wanted to learn that stuff, you had to get a job working at a studio and be fortunate enough to be in the room to look over somebody's shoulder and ask questions without getting, smashed on the head for interrupting them. But now it's just all there.
Yeah, learn how to use the EQ, learn how to use the de-esser, learn how to compress things, learn about parallel compression to get your tracks a little bit hotter, a little bit more in the front, a little bit less reverb, maybe use delay instead of, there's all sorts of things, but you have to take that upon yourself to learn. Like that's not even something you could teach, really, like how to get that modern sound, because every reference is different.
But you just taught them the most important thing, which is be aware and go down the path of learning about it. Reverb, let's talk about that for a moment. Everything sounds better with reverb. Everything.
Yeah, it covers a little mistakes, doesn't it?
It just makes it sound richer and sweeter and cooler. But you're right. We go through these ups and downs of where reverb is cool and not cool. Mm-hmm. I remember many years ago, probably back in the early to mid 90s, there was a taxi band called Martin's Dam from the Philadelphia area, and I was just in love with their music. I was actually doing a column, writing the Reader's Tapes column for Recording Magazine when I first heard them, and I called them up and said, you guys are signable. And they go, well, funny you mentioned that. We were signed. We were a band called Brickland, signed to A&M.
Nice.
And we lost that deal, and now we're Martin's Dam, which was the place where all the teenagers went to smoke weed in that suburb of Philadelphia. and they were a classic 1994 sounding, acoustic electric pop singer-songwriter band, and they were really, really good. And at one point, they invited me to come out and spend a weekend recording and engineering and producing them in their parents' house, which had a very large living room with a wood floor, a river rock fireplace, glass wall on one side, and just all these great textures.
Nice.
And I put the full band in that room live. We ran a snake out to the garage, and I sat in the garage with a Mackie 8-bus console, 3 ADATs, 2 Mackie compressors, or Lisa's compressors, and I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 dynamic mics and 2 or 3 condenser mics. And it sounds as good as anything I ever did in a multi-million-dollar SSL room. I was very proud of them for playing so well, and proud of me for I had actual engineering skills that I could make that work and sound as good as a real room. My point being, what were we talking about?
You were talking about, you started on reverb.
Oh.
Yeah.
When they came back out to the garage to listen to the first playback of the first song, they were all looking at each other like, who's going to tell them? They had that look, and I said, what? Am I horrible at what I do? Because I'm thinking I did really good. And they go, dude, nobody uses that much reverb anymore. Because I hadn't worked on a record in, probably 7 or 8 or 9 years at that point. Reverb had fallen out of fashion. Mm-hmm. So that's a great tip. Just that one little tip. Listen to the references. Where is the reverb at? Because you, especially if you're listening to your own voice, you're going to saturate that with as much reverb as doesn't sound silly. But it may sound silly even if it's just, a 6 on a scale of 10, because nobody uses that much anymore.
Yeah.
And you're right about delays. People have supplanted the use of like drippy, beautiful sounding shimmery plates or chambers or whatever. And they've gone to using, maybe a 65 millisecond delay that's very faint, but it adds dimension to the vocal without making it sound like Bing Crosby, or something.
Yeah, and there's ways to learn how to use all that stuff too. I'm not saying don't use any reverb, but one of the techniques that I've seen really successful engineers is they'll put the delay on the drum track to get the timing down.
Yeah.
And then but they won't actually put it on the drum. They'll put it on there to get the timing down. Then they'll take the delay off and put it back on the vocal track so the timing makes more sense and it sounds more rhythmic. So there's a lot of stuff to read up on how to use all those effects. But my initial point was listen to the production a little bit,
So now let's go. This is a great segue into something that I'm sure that you encounter. I've encountered it as the owner of Taxi. I'm sure you encountered it as the head screener. When something doesn't get forwarded and the member sends an email or a pissed off phone call saying, Butch Vig produced my track, or this famous mixer did my track, or I did it at this famous studio and I spent $2,000. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter, does it, how much money they spend or who mixed it? Because if it's still not the right song or right track, it doesn't matter who produced it, engineered it, or where it was done.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter. And I think you had a good point the other day when we were talking about this off camera too. It's not really how much money you spend.
Yeah.
I think your time is better spent learning song construction and learning how music works than investing millions of dollars into gear. I like gear. We love talking about it. We all like our gear.
Yes,
it's fun to play with. We like our toys and stuff. I do. I mean, I have a studio at home filled with toys. I love the UAD stuff. I love learning about the Apollo gear and oh my God, I just got this new plug-in and I want to play with it. And so now I'm putting too much tape simulation on everything because I got that Studer A800 plug-in a couple years ago. I saturated everything with tape. My mixes sounded terrible. So yeah, but educate yourself. I mean, if so-and-so mixed it, unfortunately, I really think the time has passed where a name associated with a certain piece of music gives it any more validity over something that fits the scene better.
Well, and the screener wouldn't know anyway.
Or care,
yeah. Because you're right. Just because somebody famous mixed it.
Yeah, Al Schmidt mixed this, or Ed Cherney mixed that, or whatever.
Well, Ed Cherney's not mixing anything.
Well, neither is Al Schmidt. They're both dead. But my point is, like, if you get a big name engineer on there, if the song's not right for the scene, it just doesn't matter. And it's fun. I get it. I like working with really good engineers. Who doesn't? It can make or break your project, but whether it fits the scene or what the music supervisor is looking for, it doesn't really matter whose name is on it or how much you spent on the mix. Save it for something else. And again, obviously you're not going to go back and edit it, so that's the other thing. So sometimes the screener will say, well, there's a lot of analog warmth to this and the reference was more high end, and you get the email from them, well, I spent $5,000 having that mixed, they're not going to remix it, and don't. We're just telling you why it didn't fit what we needed. That's all.
Some members, I'm sure you see this more than anybody else on the staff, with the possible exception of the actual screeners, some members will beat a dead horse to death or beyond by submitting the same thing over and over. It doesn't get forwarded, and they think, oh, that screener just didn't know what the hell they were doing. I'm going to submit it to this other thing. Next screener will get me. And the next screener doesn't get them, and they submit it again to a third thing. Then they start getting sloppy because now they're desperate. They're literally treading water looking for a board to cling on to or a life preserver or something, and they get really wide and sloppy in their submissions. Then they get fed up and they quit Taxi and they go online and they badmouth us. It's all our fault. How many times? I believe that there is value in submitting something that gets returned a few more times. But there's more to it. How do you feel about this in general, about when somebody gets a return and assuming that they take some of the feedback to heart and they go change a couple things, submit it again? How long should they keep submitting it until they go, you know what, it's just not that good, or it doesn't work that well for film and TV? Is there a point where you just give up the ghost on that piece of music and move on?
No, I don't think so. And I only know this because I've just fielded this recently in the last couple of days. The first thing is, when you get feedback, you exhale, you inhale, and exhale. You take it with a grain of salt. This is a human being that said it. It's an opinion. And if it's a return, and look, getting a return sucks. Like, none of us like hearing that our music didn't make the grade and it's not going to be passed on. That sucks. All right, so you get over that initial shock. The next thing is, take the feedback with a grain of salt. It's not an attack on your personal, on who you are as a composer or as a person.
Right.
I would definitely take the return with a grain of salt. And if I felt strongly that my piece was good and the screener didn't get it right, go ahead and submit it a few more times to listings that you think you are pitching it accurately to. As long as it fits the prompt and you feel that what you have is good and the screener was wrong, go ahead and pitch it.
And you can use the feedback. Don't just trust your own judgment, because your judgment will be not very objective. But if every screener is saying you didn't match the brief,
I'm getting there. Yeah. So now you submit it 3 or 4 more times, and the feedback isn't exactly the same, but it's similar. Why it got returned? Maybe your lead vocal's a little pitchy. Maybe the rhythm didn't grab people as much. I mean, maybe the guitar playing wasn't executed with enough expression. Maybe the synth sounded a little dated for the time period. Whatever the case may be. If you see that common thread for why it was returned, that's when you start taking the feedback a little bit more legitimately, like a little bit with a little more validity. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, maybe the screeners aren't nuts. They're onto something.
They can't all be nuts.
Because 4 people that are in different parts of the country or different parts of the world said the same thing about the same submission to a similar listing. That's when you start going, okay, wait a minute here. They're onto something.
There's tremendous value in that.
Exactly.
Multiple people listening to the same thing multiple times for similar circumstances,
right?
And they're all giving you similar feedback. That is gold.
That's when you know that it's time to consider some revisions. I'm not saying fire your engineer, ask for your $5,000 back. What I'm saying is if you did this in Logic or Pro Tools or Studio One or Cubase, whatever you use, maybe go back into the session and consider making the revision if it's feasible. Again, if you paid a session singer to sing it and they're out of tune and maybe you dropped $500 or $300 or $1,000 on the session, I'm not saying don't ever use that singer again. I'm saying maybe you should consider using somebody else if that's preventing your music from getting where you want it to be. You know, you have to consider those revisions at that point, unless your music's going to keep getting returned. So I would, again, even then, only if you agree with it and it's feasible. If it's not feasible, you might just want to walk on to something else. So, and again, if you feel that the screeners are all wrong and it still fits a listing somewhere, then submit it again. It's $5 at the end of the day. Nobody's going to lose their house over $5.
Well, this economy, maybe, but it's getting better.
Again, I don't think the submission fee is outrageous to submit something that's been returned a couple times. If you feel strongly that what you have is good, I mean, listen, the success of people in the 60s and 70s that had doors slammed in their face, if they had laid down every time a door got slammed in their face, you might never heard of Frank Sinatra or Frankie Valli or half these people. They kept at it. They kept plugging their music, and so stay with it a little bit. 1 or 2 returns does not mean that your music is terrible or won't fit anywhere. If you get 10 returns that all say the same thing, then yes, then it's time. But keep at it.
Either fix what they're all suggesting or move on. And you know what? You get better with every failure. I know it's cliche to say that. It's not about how many times you fall. It's how many times you get back up. All those
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They all those things exist. All those phrases exist because they're true.
Yeah.
And you do get better. Going back to something we talked about probably 40 minutes ago, which is looking at a taxi listing, going, oh my God, there's so many things that I have to be cognizant of and things that I have to do within this track, and it's going to make me not creative. You get better. You are not going to watch this episode and tomorrow be instantly better, go from being a 3.4 to a 9.8. But you will go from being a 3.4 to a 4.0 in 2 weeks, and then maybe a 4.2 2 weeks after that. Every single one of our successful members that I've spoken to over 32 years of running this company, they all tell me the same thing, that nobody hit the jackpot right out of the gate, that it took time, it took a lot of failure. And the difference, my dad, I quote him a lot. I'm sorry that he's dead because he doesn't know that he's getting credit for all these things now. But he always said the last one on the field, or last one to walk off the field, is the one who won the game. And that's what it takes, because you could be 6 weeks away from going, and having that moment where more of your stuff gets forwarded than doesn't. But you quit 5 weeks before that.
Yeah.
How sad is that?
I mean, you have to be willing to learn. You know, if you're just closed off to learning and you're not going to listen to anybody and you already know everything because you're the greatest composer and the screeners are stupid and Taxi's a scam, you know, then yeah, it's really not for you. You have to be willing to make some adjustments to your game. You have to be willing to learn new things, and sometimes those things are uncomfortable to learn. You know, every year I try to devote some time to get my computer skills and my engineering skills better. I'm a pretty marginal engineer. You know, I'm good. I've mixed stuff for TV and film that's come out well, but every year I feel like that is an area that I can learn more. So I go to Cubase tutorials. I go hit up Greg Ondo at Cubase, and I'm on the forums there, and I try to make my game a little bit better, because even my mixes, you know, they can sound 10 years old, you know, and that's fine as long as people don't mind that era. But there are things that I can do to improve my mixes, but I seek those out, and I know that it's a weakness of mine. I don't let people put that finger in that wound. It doesn't offend me. I know I need to get better at that. So that's one area that Craig needs to improve, is his workflow in Cubase, and to make things sound more 2024, you know, and I know that I need to improve that. So running away from it or downplaying somebody who returned my music because of it isn't going to make that problem better. What's going to make it better if I devote some time to making the improvements. And it's uncomfortable. You know, it is, because it takes time, and it might be some remedial thing. But if I'm talking to you about your music, it's a worthwhile investment, isn't it? You know, try to learn what you can while you're here to make things sound better in whatever way you can.
One of the most amazing examples of somebody who is able to sound current, who is in his 60s, has one of the worst home studios that any of us know of, is Taxi member Dean Krippaehne, who wrote Demystifying the Genre and Demystifying the Cue, and a couple others I can't think of the titles of at the moment. Incredible books. If you don't have them, you need to get them. But Dean is in his 60s, and he was one of the earliest members to find success in the world of film and TV music through Taxi, and often very generously credits us with his success in his career. But he makes music that sounds like it's of today on a very rudimentary system, using very old software, using very old samples. I forget what he uses. I wish I could name it, but when people hear it at the Road Rally, they go, really? I mean, dude, that was 17 years ago. That was the happening thing for a month. You're still using it? Sounds like crap. But you know what? He has learned how to make the best of what he's got, make the best stuff with what he's got, to the point where he's masterful at it, and he's not 30 years old, and yet his stuff sounds like a 30-year-old made it, because he pays attention to everything that you're saying. He is the quintessential example of somebody that has gotten it all right. And
remind me to get a one-to-one mentor with him next year at the rally. I'm going to get 15 minutes with Dean and go, how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, he is amazing. He's an anomaly.
And he's a nice guy, too.
He's a super nice guy. Yeah. And I think that his attitude has a lot to do with it, because he's not somebody, boy, he's a nice guy. Yeah. He's not somebody who's going to blame the screener or blame Taxi. He's going to say, what could I do to make this better? Because he genuinely wants to know. And I'm so proud of him. I would venture a guess that he's in the six-figure club. He's never disclosed his income. I know how long he's been doing it and how much stuff he gets placed. And more power to him. I wish that I could wave a magic wand and turn every one of our members, give everybody some portion of Dean's brain or heart or whatever it is that makes him so good at that stuff. Speaking of which, being in your position as the head screener and a retired regular screener, are there commonalities amongst our most successful members that you can think of that are worth sharing, so other people might go, oh, it could be something functionally that they do, it could be attitude, whatever.
Yeah, I think there are. And again, I apologize for being over generalizing, but they're really good at their pitch accuracy. They're really good at listening to the examples and reading the brief. And I know I keep coming back to that. I sound like a broken record, but usually when I email somebody who's furious with Taxi, it comes back to that. That's the first thing I check out was whatever they submitted, how close was it to the brief? 90% of the time, it wasn't even close, and I'm done. I already know what I'm going to write in that email. But the commonalities of the people that see success through Taxi are people that play to their strengths. They largely stick within their genre, but we do have a few that are capable of more than one genre, just like we have screeners that can screen in more than one genre. So they play to their strengths. They read the brief. They also don't seem to be afraid of evolution or afraid of change. And that
takes a real grown up.
That takes a real grown up, and I got to admit, like I don't mind change as long as it applies to somebody else, not to me. Change is fine as long as it's all you guys changing. I'm set in my ways.
If you croak before I do, I'll make sure that makes it on your tombstone. It's a great quote.
My tombstone's going to be crowded. I think like I've offended so many people here with my normal day to day. Like there's going to be,
and we're not even getting to your wife or your kid.
Oh my God, my wife and my kid. It's going to be small font on my tombstone of all the things Craig said.
A really tall tombstone.
Right. Yeah. So they're not afraid of change. They read the brief. They listen to the references. I also feel like they continue to learn, and that's what I was talking about in the segment before this one. That is, I know what my weaknesses are. People aren't afraid to point them out to me on a regular basis, but I know what they are, and I like to address them and make it better. And I think the people that see a lot of success with Taxi, they're not afraid to change. They're not afraid to evolve. They're constantly learning. They're going to the forums. They're going to the Taxi Forwards blog. They're getting custom critiques. They're going to the road rally. They're watching your Taxi TV every Monday. I mean, that's a selfless thing you do every Monday that helps people get better. And there's a big catalog of previous videos and stuff, and they all have certain topics and address certain things. Yeah. But you have to invest a little bit of time going over those things, and to be successful at Taxi, I think it's a combination of all those things. And it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not to replace music school. It's not a 5-hour course on how to get your music into TV and film. It's a process. And there's a lot that goes into it. That sounds
like work, Craig.
It is, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Why is it that creative people, I'm not going to just pin this on musicians alone. Oh, I hear the helicopters. There's a fire in Malibu, which you've probably heard about. We're not that far. We're not in any danger, but we hear the helicopters all day. What the hell was I just talking about?
Something about Taxi being a process is what I had. The last thing I said. That it's not really like a,
there is no real shortcut.
No, there just isn't. It takes work.
It's not impossible because we've got hundreds, thousands of successful members. The road rally. Were you in the ballroom when I started the rally off? The very first thing. The very first 10 minutes in the ballroom this year, I did something I've started doing over the last few years, which is, how many of you in this ballroom have either had stuff signed vis-a-vis Taxi submissions and or placed? And this year, about 60% of the people in the ballroom stood up. I was amazed.
That's
Previous
excellent.
years, it's been 30 or 40%, which I thought was remarkable. This year, everybody commented, wow, it was like better than half of the people in the ballroom stood up. What I came to find out later was more than half the people that came to the rally this year were first-timers. Wow. So these were relatively new members that were finding success relatively early in their Taxi career or Taxi trajectory, whatever. And I've been thinking, it's been now a month since the rally ended, and I'm thinking, why? Why did we have that unusual high percentage of people that have found some level of success, whether it's getting stuff signed or getting stuff placed? And most of them are newish members, probably 1 to 3 years into their memberships. And I think that they were self-selected by virtue of the fact that they got their butt on a plane in a rough economy where it's tough to buy food and gas in the same week. Mm-hmm. They said, you know what, I'm serious about this. I know that there's no magic bullet and it's going to take work, but everybody keeps saying that the rally is this amazing thing. They can't all be exaggerating. It ain't Michael talking about it. It's not marketing hyperbole. It's my fellow members that get off of their butts, go to this thing. And so it is self-selected. The people who are willing to do the work are the same people that show up at the rally. They're the same people who are doing the work at home. And that explains why 60% of the ballroom stood up when I asked that question.
That's great.
Which means anybody watching can do it too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've got a couple questions. How are we doing on time? Oh, wow. 1 hour and 23 minutes. Look at that. We're almost right on target. Wrestling, your artistic vision, the yin and the yang of your artistic vision versus being somebody who crafts to a brief. We talked about this way earlier in this discussion, how there's a certain amount of creativity, a lot of creativity in learning how to craft to the brief. I have yet to meet anybody, any of our successful members, when I ask this question, do you feel like you have sacrificed your creative or artistic integrity and you are prostituting yourself to come up with this stuff that fits a brief? To the person, they've all said, no, actually I feel more creative than I've ever felt before because I'm getting stuff done all the time. Whereas left to your own devices, you sit down and go, I got nothing today, and you turn on the news. Or you go out and throw a baseball to your kid or whatever to distract yourself from doing what you should be doing, which is forcing yourself to work and get better. Your experience as somebody who is highly educated in music theory, somebody who's been very successful as a studio and touring musician, and then a taxi screener, now the head screener, is there any advice that you have on how people can get to that point faster of feeling comfortable with, I'm not sacrificing my artistic integrity by writing to briefs? Well, was there a point where a switch was flicked in you, or was it gradual? Or
both, yes, all of the above. Again, if you really want to write avant-garde music that is a niche thing, you should go do that. Because that's the fastest way to figure out that you might need something else going on. Like if you just want to play straight-ahead jazz or avant-garde jazz, or you want to just do spoken word or any of those other niche kind of genres, all of which I like, by the way, you should go do that. For me personally, loved the creative to get the request to marry the creative element with the prompt. I love that challenge. Mm-hmm. I always thought that was the creative element that I enjoyed. If the perfect piece of music existed, we wouldn't have any of these briefs. So these briefs are all needing stuff or more of what they need more of. So that is the job. That is what they're asking for. They're asking you to create something based on these parameters. If it already existed, they wouldn't need it. So there is a creative element there, and I love it. And I don't feel like I've sacrificed one bit of my creativity. I've been part of very creative projects that have largely gone nowhere. They were, what do you call it? For yourself. They were just for your own validity, for your own creative.
The word you're looking for. Yeah. I can't find it either. But
and
to satisfy your own
self-indulgence, whatever you want to call it.
There you go.
And those are great. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. But I love writing production music and stuff. I love that creative part of it. I love solving problems for music supervisors where they can't quite tell you what they need. They kind of think they know what they want, and they give you an example, and you know that example is not what they're saying, and what they're saying is not that example. That is your job. And again, you guys do a really good job with those briefs, trying to isolate what they need. And that's another creative element. Try to writing to that prompt and yet making it unique, something that could stand out and go, wow, this is exactly what they were looking for. And you're going to get that. If you stay with it, you're going to get there. You're going to get the brass ring one of these times. You're going to give that supervisor exactly what they wanted because you stuck to your guns. You did something creative. You listened to the examples. You read the brief. You're going to do it. If you keep at it, you're going to get there. And I think once you do it a couple times, you get a little bit of the juice, like what was Tom Sizemore saying in Heat? Oh, this is the juice for me. Like, do you want in or out on this next bank robbery? He's like, oh no, this is the juice. I'm in. And after you get a few placements, and
or even a few forwards, we hear this when people just got their first forward,
or you hear your music in a TV show or in a movie. It's a rush, or you see your name on the credits at the end. It's like, all right, I want to do more of this. This is cool. you'll get there. It's doable.
And not every member has the same end goal in mind either.
Yeah.
It's we talked about this in that meeting the other day with the members and the clients, which is, for some people, it might be as simple as, I got one placement in a TV show this year, and I was able to sit my wife and kids down in the family room. We ordered a pizza, hopefully.
What a great night.
Yeah, ordered a pizza, made some popcorn, and everybody got to hear Dad's music in a real live TV show that the family watched.
How awesome is that?
That is probably worth more than the money they made in many cases. Other people are looking to supplement their income. Maybe they want to make another 5, 10, 20 grand a year. It's going to take you a few years to get up to that level, but it can happen. I would say the majority of our members aren't thinking in terms of, can I turn this into a 6-figure income? But those who set out to hit a realistic benchmark of, I'm going to make 5 grand next year getting placements, when they get there, they have that little epiphany you're talking about, where it's like, it juices them.
Yeah.
And now they go, you know what? If I just do more of the same things I'm doing now on a grander scale for a longer period of time, I can turn this into a 6-figure income and walk away from my job at the insurance company.
Yeah, and again, it depends on your individual goals. If you're trying to be a TV composer and you want to be noticed for your craft or how individual you are, how smart you are, you might have to sacrifice a little bit on the monetary side. If you really want to make a lot of money, you're going to have to get better at not sacrificing more creativity, but giving more people what they want. And both are very realistic goals.
Yeah.
And if it being a side hustle or supplement your income is one, that's fine. That's a great goal to have. In both cases, you're going to have to get better at your pitch accuracy and giving clients what they want.
It's funny. Here we are. We've got full circle back to the very first thing we talked about.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's good.
I said I didn't want to be boring. I said that to you yesterday. I said I'll do taxi TV, but I don't want to be boring.
But it's so true. And I'm glad you circled back to it, because it is foundational to everything else we talked about, and everything else you encounter trying to be in this industry is pitch accuracy.
Yeah.
Am I creating what they asked for? Because you could be the greatest singer in the world, greatest songwriter in the world, greatest jazz drummer in the world, greatest anything, but if you're not sending them what they asked for, no pitch accuracy, you don't have the foundation. What you have is a really good-looking window in your living room, which is great, but it ain't the whole house. Thank you.
This was great.
Yeah, you were incredibly good. Much better than last.
Oh, thanks a lot.
No, you're
so those last episodes, just fast forward past those or delete them.
You're always great, and I'm really glad you could join me for this today, and I will see you guys next week for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.